Verification here at the New York State Office of Victim Services. We are so happy that you have all joined us here today to talk about filling out the crime verification forms. So we have a slide presentation that we're going to share with you today, along with some opening remarks from our director, B. Hansen. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to B.
Great. Thanks, Katie. Thank you all for being here. Please, I know a few folks have already listed in their chat who they are and where they're from. So if you want to do that, please feel free to do that. Just so excited that you're all here. We've been doing a lot of work at OVS to try to make sure that survivors have access to the services and resources that they need and deserve. And so part of that is the new law you'll hear more about that will enable medical providers and mental health providers to be able to certify or verify that somebody's been a victim of a crime. And so we're very excited about that, because what that means is that for a lot of people who are reluctant to go to law enforcement, they'll have another avenue to be able to get resources. One of the unique things about New York State is it's the only state in the country that doesn't have a cap on us being able to pay for medical needs or mental health needs for survivors of crime. And so we're really wanting to make sure that people get access to those services that they need, whether the crime happened last week or 6 years from now, they can still access those resources. And we know for many crime victims, the medical needs can last a long time, and we know the mental health impact on survivors. So with that, I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you for taking the time. We want this to be either a continued partnership for those of you that we've partnered with before, or new partnerships with all of you. We're a small but mighty state organization, and we pride ourselves and try to be very relational with all of our partners. So we want to either improve or establish new relationships with all of you. So thank you all. So I think that's it for me for opening remarks. I want to pass it on to our General Counsel, Melissa Paquette, to get us going. Thank you.
Thanks so much, B. Hi, welcome everyone. So as B said, I'm Melissa Paquette, she, her pronouns. I'm General Counsel at the Office of Victim Services. I'm going to sit back for a lot of this presentation, and our associate attorney, Erin Oliver, will lead you through some slides. Let me share my screen. Okay. So today we're going to cover some of the options folks have for reporting crime. We'll start with an overview of the Office of Victim Services. We might be a newer organization or agency for you all, so we'll give you a brief overview, and then we'll dive into what we're talking about when we talk about these crime verification forms, which are basically documents that licensed medical and mental health providers in New York State can fill out to help document that a victim was a victim of a crime. And then we'll go through some specific drafting examples of what a crime verification form narrative section could look like. Before we dive into the slides, I just want to be clear that even though Erin and I are attorneys, this training is not intended to offer any kind of legal advice, and we're not providing any sort of legal training to you all who are attending. And we also want to emphasize that the crime verification forms that we talk about today are completely optional. They're not a mandated requirement for medical or mental health providers in New York State. They're simply a way that if you chose to, you could help a victim apply for compensation reimbursement from the Office of Victim Services. So with that, I will turn over to Erin to talk a little bit about OVS and lead us through our slides.
Good morning. As Melissa said, my name is Erin Oliver, and I am the Associate Attorney here at OVS. Just starting with a brief overview of our office. Our mission statement is to provide compensation to victims of crime, their family members, and other eligible individuals in a timely, efficient, and compassionate manner, to fund direct services to victims of crime and their families through a network of programs across New York State, and to advocate for the rights and benefits of all victims of crime. OVS funds, next slide. OVS funds approximately 250 victim assistance programs across the state, and you can see their locations on the map here. They provide services including case management, legal services, crisis intervention, court accompaniment, mental health counseling, and assistance completing the victim compensation applications. To help find programs, we offer Resource Connect, which is a concern-based search engine designed to help locate resources provided by the OVS-funded programs across the state, and that can be found at ovs.ny.gov/connect. OVS reimburses victims for many different types of expenses. For example, stolen or damaged EPP, or essential personal property. That's defined as articles of personal property necessary and essential to the health, welfare, or safety of the victim. Moving or storage fees when it's no longer safe for a victim to stay in their home. Home or vehicle modifications when a victim is disabled because of a crime. Lost wages when a victim is out of work because of crime-related injuries, or a parent is taking time off work to stay with a hospitalized child victim. Medical and mental health expenses, and that can include counseling for certain family members of the victim. Transportation expenses, which includes transportation to necessary court appearances or medical appointments, as well as additional costs for the victim to get to work necessitated by the physical injury. Funeral and burial expenses, when the victim dies as a result of the crime. Loss of support, when the victim dies as a result of the crime and leaves dependents. Cleanup or securing of a crime scene, for example, if a window is broken. Security system installation to make the home safer. Shelter costs in a domestic violence situation. And vocational rehabilitation, when the victim's injuries prevent them from performing their prior occupation. Now, note that reimbursements are claim specific, so approval for an expense on one claim does not mean the expense will be approved on another claim. Not all of these categories are compensable on every type of claim or in every situation. And now to take a look at the new crime verification forms. Here's the first page, and that includes parts 1 and 2, which should be completed by the licensed medical or mental health provider. Part 2 is what type of crime the victim or survivor experienced. So the provider can select the crime they think best represents the victim's description of the crime, but they're not required to make a selection here. That said, we understand that most providers probably don't have legal training, and it's okay if your selection is not entirely accurate. But it's still a good starting point for OVS staff to begin their review of the description of the crime on page 2 of the form. And here's page 2. It starts with the date or date range, and it doesn't need to be exact, but should be as specific as possible. Saying on or about is fine. The town or city where the crime occurred. Did the victim or survivor experience any physical injuries as a direct result of the crime? And then the most important part of the crime verification form, provide a description of the crime as told to you by the survivor or claimant. And this should include enough detail to make out the elements of a crime and should not be a legal conclusion. A legal conclusion states a legal outcome without providing specific facts or evidence. When a statement includes the name of the crime, you might have a legal conclusion. A description will generally include actions and effects. So for example, I was assaulted would be a conclusion. A description would be, on or about January 29th, 2026, a stranger hit me with a closed fist on the right side of my face, causing pain, swelling, and bruising. Another conclusion would be, they stalked me. Instead, you could say, beginning in the summer of 2025 to present, my ex-partner has been showing up to my home and place of work unannounced. I told them to stop, but they continued to show up. This made me scared for my safety. My daughter was murdered would be a conclusion. A better way to say that would be, on or about January 29th, 2026, my daughter was shot and killed by an unknown person. And finally, I was injured. Instead, you could say, as a result of this crime, I experienced pain, swelling, and bruising in my right leg that required medical attention. Helpful phrases that you can use when drafting the crime description would be on or about, at or around, or in or around. And these can be used when the survivor doesn't remember the exact date or time of the crime. For example, on or about January 29th at or around 10 a.m., or in or around summer 2024. This is helpful because knowing the date and time of the crime helps OVS understand if an alleged crime has already been compensated on a different claim, and because award eligibility or amounts can vary based on the date of the crime. In sum and substance, or words to the effect, can be used when the survivor doesn't remember the exact words used. For example, they told me words to the effect of, I am going to kill you if you don't hand me your wallet. And this is helpful because even if the survivor can't remember the exact words, it's helpful for OVS to understand what was said to or by the survivor during the crime, so we can match the crime to an appropriate penal code section. Understood this to mean, a survivor may not know the intent of the offender, but they can explain how they understood the words or actions of the offender. For example, they told me, you are going to get it, and I understood this to mean that they would hit me or otherwise harm me if I didn't do what they asked. And this is helpful because knowing how the survivor interpreted words or actions can help us understand how they understood the offender's intent and the impact of the crime. This in turn can help us match the crime as described to the appropriate penal code section. And finally, causing or resulting in. This can be used to describe the impact of the crime. For example, they shoved me into the brick wall, causing the back of my head to hit the wall and resulting in pain, bleeding, swelling, and bruising to the back of my head. And this is helpful because knowing what impact or injuries the crime caused can help OVS match the crime to an appropriate penal code section and match the injury-related expenses to the crime. And then finally, the last page of the crime verification form includes the medical or mental health provider attestation, which should be completed in its entirety by a licensed medical or mental health provider who must attest that they provided care to the victim of the crime and that the contents of the form are true and accurate to the best of their knowledge and understanding. OVS staff will confirm that the provider is licensed. And the medical or mental health provider attestation is number 2, the top of the page. Number 1 is the city or state contracted victim service provider attestation, which you can ignore. And now Melissa is going to go over some examples of drafting crime descriptions.
Thanks so much, Erin. Okay, so we know that filling out the crime verification form narrative section might be new or different from what you typically do as medical and mental health providers. So I just want to emphasize that it really is just writing the narrative as the survivor of the crime tells it to you when you're providing care to them. And so what these examples are intended to show is what is not so helpful to us at the Office of Victim Services, or OVS, when we're reviewing this document versus what might be more helpful to the Office of Victim Services. This form is really how we can identify whether a crime happened, and that crime identification is really based on the facts that you share. So in our first example, this description needs a little work. The patient presented at the emergency department with a second-degree burn. The patient reports they were assaulted. So we do have an injury, a second-degree burn, and we have a report that the patient was assaulted. Erin went over that sometimes when you have the name of a crime in your description, it's a legal conclusion. And so this is an example of that. Writing the patient reports they were assaulted. We need a little bit more factual information to verify that someone was assaulted. So to improve upon that first sentence, something you could write would be, on or about November 6, 2025, while in their apartment in Buffalo, New York, the patient's ex-partner took a pot of boiling water from the stove and poured the boiling water on the victim's body, causing pain, blistering, and skin discoloration. I examined the patient on November 7th, 2025, and treated the patient for second-degree burns that resulted from this incident. So this is a better description for our office because it can allow us to match the date of crime that is on the victim's application, which is a separate document, to the crime verification form date. So we know that you were providing care for an incident that happened on November 6th. We also have more information about what the assault looked like so that we can verify based on those facts that, yes, this meets the definition of an assault in the New York State Penal Code. And then we also have information about the injury that was originally described being the result of that assault or the pouring of boiling water. And so this more wholly links the facts to the allegation that it was an assault that resulted in injuries. This next example is very similar, but instead of the emergency department completing the form, a provider at the emergency department, this is a primary care physician. So in this scenario, the patient went to the emergency department, they received treatment for a second-degree burn, and they reported that they were assaulted. After they went to the emergency department, they went to their primary care physician. So in this scenario, we're imagining that the primary care physician is the one who is filling out the crime verification form. And that's okay too. Even if you weren't the first person to treat the survivor of the crime after the incident, as long as you're providing care and can attest that the victim told you that this is how their injury was caused, you can fill out the crime verification form as well as the primary care physician. In our third example, we have the patient was treated for a fracture as a result of falling down the subway steps. This sentence needs work because, as written at the Office of Victim Services, it's hard for us to link this to a crime, right? It could be an accident. We see that they have an injury that was the result of falling down the subway steps, but we don't have enough facts in this description to understand that this was a crime that occurred. So to make this a little bit better, we could add in a date, and we can add in how the patient fell down the stairs. And in this example, the patient was forcibly pushed by an unknown person while descending the stairs at the entry of the Bedford-Nostrand subway stop in Brooklyn, New York. The patient fell 6 to 8 steps and landed on their right arm, causing pain and limiting mobility to the patient's right arm. On or about December 30th, 2025, the patient sought emergency medical treatment at Woodhull Hospital. I examined and treated the patient for a fracture in the patient's right arm. So here again, we have the date, we have the location, we have a more fulsome description about how the injury is linked to a crime, someone pushing the patient or the victim down the stairs. And then we have that link to the treatment you provided or the verifier on this form provided to the victim. And then finally, we're moving away from medical specific care to a mental health provider example. So in this example, a line that might need work on the crime verification form is, the client is a victim of domestic violence and has been diagnosed with PTSD. So we understand when we see this at the Office of Victim Services that a crime has occurred, but we don't really know the facts or the details that constituted the domestic violence. And in New York State, domestic violence isn't in itself a crime in the penal code. And so we need additional details. And we also need additional details to show how the crime that is considered domestic violence is linked to the diagnosis of PTSD. So this is a longer improved example, and it covers a few incidents over a period of time, which is also acceptable. It doesn't have to be a single incident. If someone is receiving care, medical or mental health care from you for a series of incidents that are crimes, you can include all of those incidents on the form. So here, the client experienced physical and emotional violence from her now ex-partner from 2020 to 2025. In or around 2024, while at the client's home in Albany, New York, the client's ex-partner punched the client with a closed fist on the left side of the client's face, causing pain, swelling, and bruising. In or around May 2023, while at the client's home in Albany, New York, the client's ex-partner showed client a firearm and stated words to the effect of, "I'll use this," while walking toward the client. This caused the client to fear for their safety. From 2020 through 2025, client's ex-partner coerced or physically forced client to perform oral sex and submit to vaginal intercourse. This occurred every few months and usually occurred at client's home in Albany, New York. This caused client fear, anxiety, depression, and at times resulted in physical pain. I've been treating client on a weekly basis since October 2025. So here we have more details about what this client experienced and why they're receiving care and treatment from you. And this is sufficient. I would say even fewer facts would be sufficient. This is a very fulsome example of what could be written on a form. But this helps us understand what the facts were so that we can match the facts to a crime in the penal code. And matching those facts to a crime in the penal code is what makes a survivor of crime eligible for possible reimbursement from the Office of Victim Services. So that was a lot of information, and we have a lot of time now for questions and answers, which we are happy to take. And I see some in the chat and some in the Q&A box. Blake, would you like to moderate this?
Yes, I am happy to give us a hand here. So, we'll try to go back. We have had multiple questions, just FYI, about recording and all that. Happy to reiterate here as well. The webinar is being recorded. It will be published on our YouTube channel, and we typically send an email out after once that's done to everybody who attended today with a link to both the video as well as today's slides. So happy to answer that for everyone. Okay. Let's see here. Can the form be completed by mental health medical providers? What if a student, I'm at a college, for example, comes to our campus safety or to the Title IX office?
So you can fill out a crime verification form if you are a licensed medical or mental health provider. You can also, separate from this training, we did a separate training for victim assistance providers who are state or city funded providers to victims of crime. You're also eligible to fill out this form if you are a city or state funded victim services provider. We're just focusing on the medical and mental health providers for this specific training.
Similarly, who is allowed to fill out this form? For example, does someone need an LCSW? I'm a social work intern. Can I complete that, or should my supervisor?
You do need to be licensed by a state. You don't necessarily have to be licensed in New York State. For example, sometimes people are victims of crime in New York State and then they return maybe to their home in New Jersey and are receiving care in New Jersey. If you're licensed in the state of New Jersey, providing care to the patient in New Jersey, that's okay too. If you are an intern or don't yet have your license, you would not be permitted to fill out this form from the Office of Victim Services perspective. So we would not accept it from someone who doesn't have an active license.
And that there's a couple other additional questions about, do you need a license? So that's a good answer. I'm coming up on the portal compass with my name listed versus an advocate. Where and how would be the best way to address this?
I can take this one, Melissa. So I think that in this case, for anybody who is coming up as an advocate on the portal, please reach out, and I can put this in email in the chat as ovscompass@ovs.my.gov. If you are a victim advocate who has these kinds of credentials, like you are an RN or you have an LCSW or LMSW, I think that that's okay, but that's kind of a separate conversation. So if you are a victim advocate, you should be able to submit claims on behalf of individuals using OVS Compass, which is our claims processing system. But if you have specific questions about that and your roles in that system, you can reach out to us directly.
Thank you, Katie. Can this form be provided even if there is an accompanying police report, or is it just if other typical documentation is unavailable?
It can be provided in addition to a police report, instead of a police report, in addition to things like an FRE exam documentation. Those are examples of things we already accept as an office and have already accepted. So historically, we've taken police reports, family offense petitions, proof that you underwent a forensic rape exam. We also take certifications that you're a trafficking survivor from the state. So this is just an alternative. And I think it's possible. We haven't received a ton of crime verification forms yet, but that someone has a police report that doesn't fully outline what they experienced as a survivor of crime. And so they use the crime verification form to supplement a police report. Our policy at OVS is that if someone's submitting a crime verification form, we will not reach out to any external parties like law enforcement to try to get more information. The intent of this form is really to allow folks who don't feel comfortable working with law enforcement or other systems to have a pathway to reimbursement from the Office of Victim Services.
Okay, there's actually two or three, it looks like similarly worded questions about concern with providing factual descriptions if we weren't directly present. Can you just reiterate the context behind that?
Sure. So when you're completing this form, you're attesting that this is true and accurate to the best of your knowledge and understanding. We understand that you're receiving this information from a survivor of a crime. And so what we ask is that you accurately document what they tell you on the form. And that is what you are attesting to, that you've provided care, medical or mental health care to this person, and that you're recording what they have told you to the best of your knowledge and understanding.
Okay, this is kind of a logistics question. Can you repeat where the form is can you repeat where this form is submitted once it's completed?
I can take this one. So I wanted to take a minute I can share that. So I want to make sure that we're clear on the process. So to receive victim compensation, an individual needs to create and fill out a victim compensation application. You can do that by signing into OVS Compass, and the way that you get there is via newyork.gov. We have links and a ton of information on our public facing website. And once an individual, a survivor, a victim, one of your patients can go there, fill this out themselves. They can visit a victim advocate who is going to have access to submit claims on behalf of someone else and really walk them through the process. And then they can submit the claim application. This crime verification form is part of that application. This crime verification form is the document that by you, essentially the third party, who is saying that this person has told you what has happened to them, and you are verifying that this is what they told you. So this form is not in lieu of that claim application. It's a part of the application itself. So this is getting at some of the other questions that we've seen coming in about who and where to send this to. So as a medical provider, or a mental health provider, unless you are also a victim advocate who is submitting these applications, you are going to submit this separately, or you can give a copy to your patient to submit it themselves. And so you can send that to OVS intake. Oh my gosh, there's too many email addresses. OVS intake at ovs.ny.gov. And that's the best place to submit documents. It goes into a shared inbox where we have a team of people whose responsibility is to help answer phones, enter paper applications, and also just coalesce everything that they get and put it with the right claims. So I hope that clears up some confusion.
And Katie, this is one similar with regards to one is the form accessible on the website or in Compass, and if it's not in Compass, would it need to be uploaded along with the application at the same time of submission?
That's a really good question. So I put in the chat already, but I am happy to do it again. A paper version of this form is available on the website now. You can go there, you can download it. So if your patient is filling out the claim application themselves on OVS Compass, they will need to upload this document directly into that system as part of their application. Or if they don't have it right then, that's also okay. They can email a copy of it later. If you are a victim advocate, and this is a very specific designation, if you are a victim advocate and you receive, or a victim service provider, I should say, and you receive your organization receives city or state funding, you have the ability to verify that a crime occurred right within OVS Compass. That form and components of that form and the fine print at the end are essentially embedded as part of the application if that patient has chosen not to go to law enforcement or other entities to verify that this crime happened to them. But for all intents and purposes, if somebody has the form, they can upload it as part of their application at the same time. If they don't have it right then, they can upload it later. If the claim comes in and it gets to our intake team and they see that this person has selected, yes, I have a crime verification form. Yes, I want to use that to verify that my crime occurred. No, I don't have it right now. Someone will reach out to them later to get it.
All right. Is there a Spanish version of the new OVS application available?
So that's a good question. So on the paper application, we don't have that yet. However, one of the benefits of our new claims processing system is that it is dynamic in that when you go to fill out the claim online as part of OVS Compass, you can select the language in which you want it to appear on your browser. So individuals should be able to view the application in all of the 13 most common languages spoken in New York, including Spanish. And if you need any additional support, or your Spanish speaking patients need any additional support while they're filling out the application, or just want to talk to somebody to see if they're even eligible before they go through the whole rigmarole of this, we do have a whole unit of Spanish speaking claim eligibility investigators who are ready, willing, and able to assist.
Okay. There are a couple specific client related questions that we're getting. Katie, can you just share if they have questions about an individual existing claim or eligibility type questions? How can they get those questions answered?
So the best way to get information about claims, new or existing, is to send us an email at ovsinfo@ovs.ny.gov. Honestly, if it goes to intake or if it goes to the Compass email, we're such a small agency, your inquiry is going to get to the right person. But policy, claim related things, OVS info is your best bet. Documents, things like that, intake is your best bet.
There's a question earlier about this form having any impact or effect to the SANE or FRE forms, SANE program or FRE forms that go along with it.
Not necessarily. If a forensic rape exam is conducted, that does make somebody eligible also for victim compensation. So it's not necessary to fill this out in conjunction with it, but it shouldn't harm a person's chances of receiving, compensation or, getting that eligibility determination if both are filled out. Just not necessary.
I'm just reviewing questions right now. So a lot of these are duplicate, so they've been answered. Eligibility about crime occurring out of the state or out of the country. Are victims able to receive compensation?
Go ahead, Katie.
So if you are if somebody is a victim of a crime outside of New York State, there are victim compensation programs in every state in the nation, and I think almost all of the territories as well. So you should be you need to file the claim in the state in which the crime occurred. But just note that every state does have their own rules. So just be aware that there are going to be differences in how this happens. If you do have questions about that, you can reach out to us. We actually have, it's a relatively close-knit group of compensation program managers. So we'd be happy to make a warm handoff. And we do that pretty frequently. And just this last week with another state in the tri-state area. So happy to help with that. In terms of crimes that happen outside of the country, we have a very narrow scope of what we can currently provide compensation for. Your patient needs to have been the victim of terrorism in a foreign country, and that it does happen. We do see it, but it's a very specific definition. If you have specific questions about that, please email our info inbox, and we'd be happy to talk that through with you.
I see one earlier. This is another sort of FRE related one. If if you complete an OVS or FRE form, qualified a victim for reimbursement for services, if they decided not to notify law enforcement, is that not the case? Does the crime verification form still need to be filed if an FRE form has already been done?
No. Blake, I saw a couple of questions in the Q&A and in the chat about HIPAA. Melissa or Erin, do you want to talk a little bit about how HIPAA might come into play with these forms and some of the expectations providers might have surrounding that?
Sure. I think broadly, you should speak to your institution or your supervisors about your obligations under HIPAA and what might be required in your practice to complete this form. OVS isn't going to provide legal guidance in that area. I will say when folks apply for compensation to OVS, they fill out a HIPAA form. If there's a medical or mental health component, that would inform their claim and help us reimburse so that we can access information from medical and mental health providers.
This is a common question I'm seeing us get, not necessarily today, but in general. But if a victim refuses to cooperate with police, but the form has been completed, will the victim still need to cooperate with police in order to receive compensation?
Cooperation with law enforcement isn't going to be a consideration if you submit a crime verification form because, again, the intent is for this form to be used for folks who have reasons that they don't want to work with law enforcement or participate in the criminal legal process. And so we do not make calls to law enforcement to speak about cooperation if we receive this crime verification form.
Some questions have slowed down.
There were a couple of questions I saw about filling out the form by both a victim advocate and a medical or mental health provider. And if you look at the form, there's two sections on the second page. And one of them is for victim advocates and the other is for medical or mental health providers. And only one of those needs to be filled out. So if you are a victim advocate and you're receiving fund and your organization receives funding from a city or state contract, then you can fill that out. If you are not that, or you are a medical or mental health, a licensed medical or mental health professional providing care to the patient, you can sign the bottom. You don't have to have both of those filled out or signed.
And I don't think I'm the one who can speak to this, but I want us to plug that we have additional trainings available on our website. I think this process might be new to some medical and mental health providers around compensation. Katie or Blake, could you speak to the additional trainings that are available on our website?
I can take this one. So there is we recently just changed these laws, right? So up on our website, if you go to the compensation program updates, and I put this a little bit earlier in the chat, but I can drop it in again. There are some trainings specifically for all of the changes that have occurred and go into much more detail about the victim compensation program. Those are up on our OVS YouTube page, but they're also linked on the public facing website. There's also a training specifically tailored to victim service providers in filling out these forms. And that was delivered, I think, December 19th. A link to that is also up there. If you are a victim service provider who is going to be helping individuals who, fill out compensation claims on their behalf, and you're new to the field or you just want to brush up on what you know about OVS, we do offer a monthly victim assistance program compensation training. This really is not for medical and mental health professionals. This is very specifically for programs who are going to be working with victims, both for OVS compensation purposes as well as the rest of the criminal justice. We're helping people through the criminal justice system after they've experienced a crime. You're welcome to take those trainings, but I wanted to kind of set expectations there that if you're a medical or mental health provider in private practice or you work for large organizations, this might not be for you, but it is up there. And then there are other videos up there in various that might be a little bit out of date, but they do go into detail on our YouTube channel about how to fill out claims, what people are eligible for. Feel free to visit that for more information, but you can always reach out to us if you have questions. And I did see another question in the chat about would a copy of the FRE need to be with the application? There seems to be a lot of questions about the FRE claim form. So if an individual presents in the ED for following a sexual assault and a forensic rape exam is completed, and that person has decided that they want to have OVS billed for those services directly rather than self-pay or going through their insurance. It is a very frequent occurrence. Copies of those claim forms actually come to our office. So if somebody indicates on their OVS compensation application, which is separate, that they went for an FRE, we know to look for that claim form, and it doesn't have to be submitted with the application itself. We can go look for it, and really we have a staff of well-trained individuals who, if something is missing, we know to ask for it, and we try our best not to bother or re-traumatize victims and survivors in asking for a lot of documentation. So if things are submitted by an advocate or they're submitted by somebody else, if it's a minor, parent or guardian, we'll try to reach out to providers and advocates first to gather information. And if we truly don't have something, then we will ask for it ourselves.
There was one question about operationalizing this in an emergency room, and I think this is a new process for us, this crime verification form, and having mental health and medical providers be able to fill out the form. So I think we're going to want to hear how people can do this the best way. And I think in some instances, for some medical and mental health providers, it may be connecting them back to a local victim assistance program that we talked about at the beginning, and maybe we can put that in the chat again to be able to follow up, because this form is just part of the larger application for the victim for compensation. And so we've got victim assistance programs that we fund that can help people go through that whole process and then also provide them with other additional supports they need.
Your question about, is there a list of crimes for eligibility? It is any crime on our crime verification form. We have a list of crimes that you can check, and those are some common crimes that we see people submitting applications for. But if someone is a victim of a crime, we will accept the application for consideration and for consideration of reimbursement. It really is any crime.
There is a question about connecting the patient with an advocate who may speak their particular language. I think maybe the best way is if you aren't aware of programs is to use OVS Resource Connect. I don't want to answer for you and Katie, Melissa, but we can share a link to that too.
So I can't really speak for how programs are able to connect individuals with those who speak their language, but if you are to call our office, we do contract with a language line where we're able to, connect and work with a interpretation service for most languages. And our staff are generally trained on how to do that.
Yeah, and if you look through the Resource Connect, there are many organizations that we fund that speak multiple languages. So I think the question is there one near where you're working? In the city particularly, we fund a number of organizations that speak lots of different languages and dialects.
Yeah, I'm scrolling back up right now and see if we missed any. Yeah, a couple. Is there training for FREs? And Katie, you already answered that earlier. There is. You do the FRE reimbursement training as well, or support hour, right?
Yep. So every other month or so, we've been offering FRE provider support hour. This really is geared towards providers who are billing providers and those who are submitting bills for reimbursement for forensic rape exam services. But we answer all sorts of questions about that, and we're happy to connect you with DOH if you have more kind of programmatic regulatory questions about how, operating and what's required and what's not.
Did we answer this? There was a question about getting reimbursement for medical services and medical claims. I know that's kind of outside of this, but is there something briefly you can say, Katie?
So I think that I answered part of this during, this is in terms of getting compensation. So we pay compensation to the person who submitted, who is looking for a reimbursement, and we pay for we reimburse for out of pocket costs associated with the crime. So if an individual person, if your patient is looking for compensation, looking for help with any kind of medical, mental health, or other types of, reimbursement that Erin detailed, they would submit an application, or they could go to a victim service provider who can help them submit an application. And once that goes through, if the person is determined to be eligible for this, then they have a claim eligibility and they are able to submit billing, they're able to submit receipts, billing invoices, explanations of benefits to our office. And depending on the person, it's really claim specific. So depending on the person's circumstances, depending on whether they actually paid out of pocket. Let's see, they say they went to go see a therapist who was outside of their provider network, and they had to pay the full cost of counseling, $140, $160. We could reimburse them for the costs associated with that, assuming that all of the other I's have been dotted, T's have been crossed, and the person is eligible and the services are crime related. I know that's a lot of caveats, but it's what we are looking for. But let's say that the person has insurance and they went to the emergency room and they have an $80 copay for going to the emergency room. We would want to see the explanation of benefits that person was responsible for paying that $80. And once that goes into our system, we do what we say, kind of internal to us, as we create an expense, and we are able to issue a check to that person through the statewide financial system. And that's the statewide financial system. It is unfortunately not an immediate payment. It can take several weeks. I think 4 to 6 weeks is at most what I've heard. But that is how that person actually receives compensation. On the other side of that, we do pay medical and mental health providers directly. So let's say that and we do have a fee schedule for medical and mental health providers. It's a little bit, it gets complicated. So I think that we do work directly with providers if somebody cannot pay directly. And so if we know what somebody's out-of-pocket costs, and you as a provider are set up in the statewide financial system, there are some steps to doing that. We are able to pay you directly for what that patient's out-of-pocket costs would be. And we do this all the time and have been doing this for decades. So we are able to, there's different ways that people can get compensation, and there's different scenarios that we can pay providers directly without the person having to necessarily front the costs for it. But it always comes down to what is the patient's responsibility.
See, is there a maximum covered cost per application for medical and mental health care related costs? I went to the OVS website and I didn't see that specified. So there is no cap on medical or mental health costs, broadly speaking.
Two quick ones. Is there a time frame for submitting the form?
Not necessarily. So the crime verification form. So that's what I'm going to assume the person was asking about. So if somebody submits the application and they don't have the crime verification form at the time that they submit the claim application, generally it's a week or two that our intake teams gives for somebody to get that form in, so that we can move it along in the process. If that person is really unable to get it into us in that time, we do what's called, we will reject the claim. It does, but really things are seldom set in stone in our office. So if it's rejected, we can reopen the claim later once we receive any requisite documentation, not just a crime verification form. But we're able to reopen it, but we can't have claims sitting in limbo forever. So our intake staff generally wait a week or two, and then they will have to either reject the claim and say, listen, I'm so sorry, you haven't submitted this form within a couple of weeks. Please get it to us. When you get it to us, we can reopen your claim and assign it to an eligibility investigator. But once you have it, I think that's really, and it's submitted, it's uploaded to the claim, or it's emailed to the OVS intake inbox, then we can move it along in the process and it gets to staff for processing.
And apologies, because I did see some questions about registered nurses. If you're a licensed nurse providing care to someone, you can fill out this form. I see it. If a person goes to the emergency department and a crime verification form doesn't get filled out, but they then report it to campus personnel, can a crime verification form be filled out by our medical mental health personnel? Yes. If you are providing care to the person as a result of that crime, you can fill out this form. You don't need to reach back out to the emergency department or have someone from the emergency department fill out the form. If you are providing care, you can fill it out. And then if you are filling out this crime verification form, we do not need a police report. If the survivor wants to send us a police report, if they have one that also supports the crime, we'll take it. But the crime verification form is enough, if filled out correctly, for us to substantiate that a crime occurred. If you're not providing care, you should not fill out this form because, again, you're attesting that you are providing care to the victim or survivor of a crime.
Oh, in the chat asking, Melissa, if you can repeat that. Did you say the provider signing must be the providing care to the client?
When you're signing the form, you're telling OVS that you have provided care. It doesn't have to be in the immediate aftermath, so it doesn't have to be in the emergency department. You don't have to be the first provider they've gone to. You just have to be providing them care related to the injuries or mental health presentation that resulted from the crime. And you do not have to reach back out to the emergency department if you are providing care to the person subsequent to them already going to the emergency department. If it's helpful for your care of the person and to receive more information, absolutely you can do that. It's not necessary to complete this form. If the survivor is telling you what happened to them and you are providing care based on what happened to them, you can fill out this form.
I think we cleared them. I don't see any other.
It's a really helpful questions. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Oh, one did just come in. Okay, so can you clarify what else we need to do as providers besides filling out the form? For example, how do we help a victim file a claim, or how do we connect them with an advocate that can help them file a claim?
So I think that for victims or for medical or mental health professionals, I really recommend that unless you are already helping people file claims, I do not recommend that you help them through this process. It is a long-term commitment, essentially, or it should be, to help somebody through the criminal justice system and to help them through the compensation process, especially since we can pay for crime-related expenses for as long as somebody needs it. So if you are a medical or mental health professional providing care, we recommend that you visit that OVS Resource Connect or encourage your patients to visit Resource Connect to find a victim service provider near them who can help them through this process. So you can fill out the crime verification form. That is absolutely something that you can, and we hope that you start doing soon. But for the actual compensation process, we really recommend they work with someone who's been trained on that.
Yeah, and in many hospitals, there are social workers, especially working with victims of domestic violence or sexual violence, who know a lot about this process and can either can help do that work or connect to an organization that can do that work. Folks that are doing forensic rape exams, often understand this process and can connect to advocates who are doing this work as well.
And I see the question, is this a document the victim has to request or that the provider will just provide as part of the documentation shared with the patient? I think this is part of the broader question about how this is operationalized. We at OVS, we do have medical providers on staff, so I can't say we're all not medical providers, but the folks on this call, we are not medical providers. And so we really would advise you to speak to, again, your institution, your practice, or talk to one another about how you think this could best work. And OVS will certainly collect best practices, and we're hoping to learn from all of you. Probably it's helpful and nice to talk about compensation if you have information about it, or you can use OVS Resource Connect to connect them to a service that can more wholly describe the process, and then they can follow up with you if they want a crime verification form. Just an option. There are many ways to implement this, and please update us when you find the sweet spot of implementation for yourself.
And there are, to piggyback off of what Melissa just said, so I can't personally, and I can't speak for the other panelists on the call, but there are a few other states that have implemented this type of a law. I think New Mexico and Illinois. So if you have colleagues who are in either of those states, we might, we can help direct you in other ones. If you have colleagues in either of those states, they've been doing this for a while now. So you can reach out to them, find out what they're doing, how that's going, best practices. But again, like Melissa said, please share with us. We're looking to learn along with all of you.
And I just want to say thank you so much. There were, I think at one point, about 180 folks on this call. And so we see that there's an interest in learning about this process and in all of you helping survivors beyond what you already do every day. So I just want to state our appreciation for you listening and be willing to learn throughout this new law and process with OVS.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Melissa's sentiment on that too, because I think, as Katie mentioned too, this is new. This is new for New York State, and we really want this to be an opportunity for people who've been victims of crime to be able to access more resources. And so that's really the intent, and how we can do that better is going to be an ongoing learning process. And just really appreciate you all taking the time to be here, and we want to be partners with you. So we want this not to be like a one and done. We really want, feel free to reach out to us and to kind of work with us to help make this the best it can be for survivors.
I think we may be at a good ending point. So thank you again for attending. Again, the slides and the presentation, the video recording will be posted to the OVS website in the coming weeks. Thank you again.